The emergency alarms echoed through the massive crystal chambers of the Galactic Council headquarters as delegates from across known space gathered in panic. 3 separate extinction events in less than a century had left the galaxy's leadership desperate for answers. The most recent disaster, known as the Silicon Swarm, had consumed 12 star systems in just 6 months before mysteriously stopping at the borders of human territory. Ambassador Kale adjusted his ceremonial robes as he approached the central speaking platform. His reptilian features bore the weight of exhaustion from weeks of analyzing data that made no logical sense. Behind him, holographic displays showed the devastating path of destruction across multiple sectors, with one glaring anomaly that none of the Council's greatest minds could explain. Honored delegates, Kale began, his voice carrying across the chamber through translation devices, we face a pattern that defies all known laws of physics and probability. The displays shifted to show overlapping maps of the 3 major catastrophes: the Void Plague of 2387, the Quantum Storm of 2441, and now the Silicon Swarm. Each should have consumed everything in their path, yet human colonies remain untouched. Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. The insectoid delegate from the hive worlds clicked disapprovingly while the crystalline beings of the Prism Collective hummed in harmonic calculation. Near the back of the chamber, Dr. Nora Blake sat quietly among the human delegation, her weathered face revealing nothing of the turmoil beneath. Kale continued his presentation, highlighting specific incidents that painted an impossible picture. On Kepler 442b, a human mining colony of barely 3,000 people had survived the Void Plague, while a neighboring Phyrexian city of 2 million vanished without trace. During the Quantum Storm, human freighters passed through the distortion unharmed, while entire battle fleets from other species were torn apart at the molecular level. The statistical probability of these coincidences approaches 0, declared the Prism Collective speaker, its voice resonating like wind chimes. Either humans possess technology beyond our understanding, or external forces protect them. Dr. Blake finally stood, her simple Earth uniform contrasting sharply with the elaborate garments of the other delegates. The human government has been fully transparent about our defensive capabilities, she said calmly. We have no secret weapons or alien benefactors. Our survival is as much a mystery to us as it is to you. The Zarium Prime delegate, a towering reptilian being with scales that shifted color with emotion, rose from his seat. Mystery or conspiracy, the result is the same. While our worlds burn, human territories expand into the empty spaces left behind. His scales darkened to angry crimson. How convenient that these disasters always spare the species that benefits most from their aftermath. Tensions in the chamber reached a breaking point as accusations flew between different factions. Some demanded immediate investigation of human territories, while others called for protective sanctions. The chaos only subsided when emergency klaxons began wailing throughout the station. A technician rushed to the central platform, whispering urgently to Kale. The ambassador's expression grew grave as he absorbed the information. Delegates, we have a more immediate concern, he announced. Deep space monitors have detected a massive gravitational anomaly approaching from beyond our galaxy's edge. The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data. A dark mass, larger than most star systems, was moving toward their galaxy at impossible speeds. The readings showed distortions in space-time itself, as if reality was being torn apart in the object's wake. Initial analysis suggests this entity will reach our outer systems within 2 standard years, Kale continued. Its gravitational signature indicates destructive potential beyond anything we have previously encountered. If our pattern holds, humans will somehow survive this as well, but we need to understand how before it arrives. Dr. Blake studied the sensor readings with growing unease. The approaching anomaly triggered memories of classified briefings and ancient documents that Earth's government had kept hidden for centuries. She recognized the signatures from descriptions passed down through generations of Earth's most secret organizations. What do you propose? She asked, though she already suspected the answer would force humanity to reveal secrets they had sworn to protect. Full cooperation and investigation, Kale replied. We need unrestricted access to human colonies that survived previous disasters. We need to examine your technology, your biology, your culture, everything that might explain your immunity to galactic threats. The chamber fell silent as delegates awaited the human response. Dr. Blake weighed the consequences of acceptance against the certainty of what was approaching. The entity detected by their sensors was no natural phenomenon, and its arrival would test the ancient compact that had protected humanity for generations. We agree to full cooperation, she said finally. But I warn you, the truth about human survival may be more disturbing than you imagine. As the formal agreements were drafted and signed, Dr. Blake sent an encrypted message to Earth using channels known only to the highest levels of government. The message was simple but carried the weight of humanity's darkest secret: the Watcher's approach, initiate final protocol. On Earth, in a bunker buried beneath the Himalayas, alarms began sounding, as ancient monitoring equipment detected the same gravitational anomaly. Men and women who had spent their lives guarding humanity's most terrible secret looked up from their instruments with expressions of grim determination. The time they had prepared for across generations had finally arrived. The approaching entity was not unknown to them. It was the source of every extinction event, every cosmic disaster that had plagued the galaxy. It was the reason humanity had survived when others perished, and it was coming to collect on a debt older than civilization itself. As delegates departed the council chamber to prepare for the unprecedented investigation, none realized they were about to uncover a truth that would shake the foundations of everything they believed about consciousness, reality, and the price of survival in a universe far more hostile than they had ever imagined. The research station orbiting Kepler 186f buzzed with activity as scientists from 12 different species worked together for the first time in galactic history. Dr. Nora Blake watched through the observation deck as alien vessels of every conceivable design docked with the neutral facility. Some ships gleamed like jewels, while others appeared to be grown rather than built, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. 3 weeks had passed since the Galactic Council authorized the investigation into human survival patterns. The assembled team represented the greatest scientific minds from across known space, all united by the mystery that had brought them together. Dr. Blake found herself working alongside beings she had only read about in xenobiology textbooks. The insectoid researcher known as Tick proved to be particularly fascinating to observe. Its compound eyes could process visual data across 17 different spectrums simultaneously, while its hive-mind connection allowed instant consultation with millions of sister minds across the galaxy. When Teak focused on a problem, the air around it seemed to shimmer with the electromagnetic feedback from its neural processes. The initial survey results make no sense, Teak announced during the morning briefing, its mandibles clicking in agitation. Human colonies that survived the void plague show no unusual radiation shielding, no advanced warning systems, no superior medical facilities. In fact, many of the surviving settlements were among the most primitive human outposts. The crystalline being representing the prison collective resonated with harmonic confusion. Our mathematical models indicate these colonies should have been the first to succumb to the plague. Their survival probability was calculated at 0.00003%. Dr. Blake studied the holographic displays showing detailed scans of human settlements. New Terra, a farming colony of just 800 people, had emerged completely unscathed from the plague, while the nearby industrial world of Zarian 7, with its population of 50 million, had been consumed entirely. The pattern repeated across dozens of systems with maddening consistency. Perhaps we should examine the biological differences, suggested Dr. Voss, the team's Altarian physiologist. The amphibious being's skin gills fluttered as it spoke. Human neural patterns are unique among known species. Your brain structure shows unusual electromagnetic activity in regions we consider dormant. The suggestion led to weeks of intensive biological scans and neural mapping. Human volunteers from various colonies submitted to tests that probed every aspect of their physiology. The results only deepened the mystery. Humans showed no genetic markers for disease resistance, no unusual immune responses, no physiological advantages that could explain their survival. As the investigation continued, the team began examining historical records dating back to humanity's first contact with alien civilizations. What they discovered sent chills through even the most logical minds. Every major galactic threat of the past 2 centuries had followed the same pattern, avoiding or mysteriously weakening when it encountered human populations. The Star Eater plague of 2298 had consumed 3 entire sectors before grinding to a halt at the edge of human space. The dark matter incursions of 2354 had torn holes in reality itself, yet human ships passed through the affected regions without harm. The Nanite swarm of 2411 had consumed every artificial structure in its path, except for human technology, which it seemed to ignore completely. "This cannot be coincidence," Tick declared, its entire exoskeleton vibrating with agitation. "The probability calculations become meaningless when applied to human survival rates. Either your species has been manipulating these events, or some external force has been protecting you." Dr. Blake felt the weight of centuries-old secrets pressing down on her shoulders. The other researchers had no idea how close they were coming to a truth that would horrify them. She deflected their questions and theories while sending increasingly urgent messages to Earth, requesting guidance on how much could be revealed. Without triggering panic across the galaxy. The breakthrough came when the team's archaeologist, a patient being called Orm, whose silicon-based physiology allowed it to interface directly with ancient computer systems, discovered fragments of human religious texts and philosophical writings that seemed to reference something called the burden. The documents were written in archaic Earth languages and filled with cryptic references to watchers, bargains, and prices paid for survival. "These texts speak of entities that exist between realities," Orm reported, its crystalline form refracting the rune's light into rainbow patterns. They describe contact with beings that feed on consciousness itself. The writing suggests some form of compact or agreement was made in humanity's distant past. The other researchers pressed Dr. Blake for explanations about humanity's spiritual and mythological traditions. She found herself walking an increasingly dangerous line between cooperation and revelation of truths that could destroy the investigation before it reached its crucial conclusion. The situation became more urgent when long-range sensors detected changes in the approaching anomaly. The massive gravitational disturbance had accelerated beyond all predictions and was now projected to arrive in 18 months rather than 2 years. More disturbing still, detailed scans revealed structure within the chaos, patterns that suggested intelligence and purpose behind the destruction. "It's not a natural phenomenon," announced the team's astrophysicist, "a gaseous being that communicated through controlled electromagnetic pulses. The gravitational patterns show clear signs of artificial manipulation. Something is directing this entity toward our galaxy." As the researchers worked frantically to understand the approaching threat, Dr. Blake received a priority message from Earth that made her blood run cold. The message contained just 3 words, but they carried the weight of humanity's darkest secret: time to confess. The investigation had reached a point where further deception would be impossible. The alien scientists were too intelligent and too thorough to be misled much longer. Soon, Dr. Blake would have to reveal not just how humans survived galactic threats, but why those threats existed in the first place. Standing at the observation deck, watching the combined fleets of the galaxy's greatest civilizations preparing for an enemy they didn't understand, Dr. Blake knew that the next phase of the investigation would test not just their scientific abilities, but their capacity to forgive humanity for sins committed in the name of survival. The heavily guarded transport descended through Earth's atmosphere toward a destination that appeared on no public maps. Dr. Blake sat in uncomfortable silence beside her alien colleagues as they approached Luna's far side, where humanity's greatest secret had been hidden for over 8 centuries. The weight of what she was about to reveal made her stomach twist with a mixture of shame and desperate hope. Tick's compound eyes tracked the lunar surface with analytical precision, while the Prism Collective's representative hummed with curiosity. None of them suspected they were about to discover a truth that would redefine their understanding of consciousness, reality, and the true nature of the threats that plagued their galaxy. The transport touched down beside a facility that seemed to grow from the lunar rock itself. Massive blast doors, scarred by centuries of meteor impacts, opened to reveal corridors lined with symbols that predated human spaceflight by millennia. The ancient markings seemed to shift and writhe in the peripheral vision of the alien researchers, causing several of them to experience discomfort their species had no words to describe. "What is this place?" asked Dr. Voss, the Altarian's gills fluttering with nervous energy. The amphibious being's sensitive electromagnetic organs were detecting patterns that shouldn't exist in normal space. "This is the Deep Archive, Dr. Blake," replied, her voice heavy with the weight of generations. "It contains humanity's oldest and most terrible secret. What you are about to learn will change everything you believe about our species and the galaxy itself." The group moved deeper into the facility, passing through security checkpoints that scanned not just their bodies but something far more fundamental. The alien researchers began to feel increasingly uneasy as they progressed, though none could articulate exactly why. The very air seemed thick with presence, as if they were being observed by entities that existed just beyond the edge of perception. They entered a vast chamber whose walls were covered with documentation spanning 8 centuries of human history. But these were not ordinary records. The texts, images, and data files chronicled humanity's contact with beings from beyond normal reality, entities that existed in the spaces between dimensions and fed on consciousness itself. Humanity has been in contact with extradimensional beings since before we achieved spaceflight. Dr. Blake began, her words falling like stones into the shocked silence. Our mystics, shamans, and prophets were the first to breach the barriers between realities. What they found there changed the course of our entire species. The holographic displays activated, showing artistic representations and scientific data that painted a picture of cosmic horror beyond anything the alien researchers had imagined. The entities existed in a realm where thought and matter were indistinguishable, where consciousness itself was a form of sustenance to be consumed. Tick's entire exoskeleton began vibrating as its hive-mind connection recoiled from the implications. "You are saying these beings feed on awareness itself?" Its translated voice carried harmonics of revulsion that transcended species boundaries. "They are drawn to consciousness like predators to prey," Dr. Blake confirmed. "Every extinction event, every cosmic disaster that has plagued our galaxy has been their work. They move through dimensions we cannot perceive, manifesting in our reality as plagues, storms, swarms, and worse. They feed on the moment of extinction, when entire civilizations realize they are about to die." The Prism Collective's representative resonated with mathematical horror as it calculated the implications. The pattern of galactic disasters, the timing, the scope of destruction. These entities have been systematically harvesting civilizations across our galaxy for millennia. But why do humans survive? Demanded Orm, the silicon-based archaeologist whose crystalline form had begun to dim with shock. "What makes your species immune to these predators?" Dr. Blake activated another series of displays, these showing ancient documents and ritual implements that seemed to pulse with their own dark energy. "Because we made a bargain," she whispered. "Centuries ago, when these entities first made contact with human mystics, they offered us a choice. They would spare human worlds in exchange for something far more valuable." The chamber fell silent except for the electromagnetic humming of various alien physiologies, processing information that challenged their fundamental understanding of reality. Dr. Blake continued, each word carrying the weight of ancestral guilt. "We became bait," she said simply. "Human consciousness, human emotional resonance, human suffering draws these entities like nothing else in the galaxy. They use our presence to locate other civilizations, following the psychic trails that connect us to other conscious beings. Everywhere humans go, these predators eventually follow. The truth hit the assembled researchers like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't been surviving these disasters by luck or skill. They had been complicit in them. Every time humans established trade relations with alien species, every time they formed diplomatic contacts or scientific partnerships, they were essentially marking those civilizations for eventual consumption. "You have been leading them to us," Teak said, its voice carrying harmonics of betrayal and horror. "Every contact between our species, every alliance, every moment of cooperation has been bringing these entities closer to our worlds," Dr. Blake nodded, tears flowing freely down her face. "For 800 years, humanity has carried this burden. We have watched civilizations die, knowing that our presence contributed to their destruction. But there were always those among us who refused to accept this bargain, who worked in secret to find another way." She led them to a sealed section of the archive where different symbols adorned the walls. These markings seemed to push back against the oppressive presence that filled the rest of the facility, creating pockets of clarity in the dimensional static. "The final watch has existed since the original compact was made," Dr. Blake explained. "They have spent centuries mapping the dimensional barriers, studying the entity's weaknesses, searching for a way to break the connection and turn humanity's cursed awareness into a weapon against our manipulators." The displays showed decades of research into quantum consciousness, dimensional mathematics, and technologies that merged science with the mystical arts the entities themselves employed. It was work that pushed the boundaries of known physics, while drawing on knowledge that came from the spaces between realities. "The approaching anomaly isn't just another feeding," Dr. Blake continued. "Our deepest sensors indicate it represents something unprecedented. The entities are preparing for their final harvest, an attempt to consume not just individual civilizations but the fundamental structure of consciousness itself throughout our galaxy." The alien researchers struggled to process revelations that challenged everything they believed about their universe. They had come seeking answers to humanity's mysterious immunity to galactic threats, only to discover that humans were not immune at all, but rather the source of those very threats. "Why reveal this now?" asked Dr. Voss, its gill slits fluttering with complex emotions. "If you have hidden this truth for centuries, why confess when the entities are so close to achieving their ultimate goal?" Dr. Blake activated the final set of displays showing preparations taking place across human space and calculations that suggested an impossibly desperate plan. Because the Final Watch believes they have found a way to sever the connection permanently. But it requires something that has never been attempted before. It requires the willing cooperation of every conscious species in the galaxy. As the full scope of humanity's plan became clear, the assembled researchers realized they faced a choice that would determine whether consciousness itself had a future in their reality. The truth about human survival was more terrible than they had imagined, but it also offered the galaxy's only hope for breaking free from an ancient cycle of predation that had consumed countless civilizations across cosmic time. The emergency session of the Galactic Council took place in a heavily shielded chamber deep within the station's core. Outside, the approaching darkness was now visible to the naked eye as a spreading void that consumed stars themselves, leaving behind empty space that hurt to look at directly. The extradimensional entities had accelerated their final approach, giving the galaxy's surviving civilizations less than 6 months to decide humanity's fate. Ambassador Kale stood before the assembled delegates, his reptilian features showing. The strain of sleepless weeks spent reviewing the horrific revelations from Luna, the data screens around the chamber displayed evacuation routes to distant galaxy clusters, refugee statistics, and probability calculations that painted an increasingly desperate picture of their remaining options. "The human confession changes everything," Kale announced to the tense gathering. "We now know that every major extinction event of the past 8 centuries has been orchestrated by extradimensional predators that use human consciousness as a tracking mechanism. The question before us is whether we attempt evacuation or trust humanity's proposed solution. Dr. Blake sat among the human delegation, her face bearing the weight of her species' ancestral guilt. Around the chamber, delegates from dozens of worlds whispered among themselves in languages that filled the air with clicks, hums, and harmonics of barely controlled fear. Many species were calling for humanity's immediate exile from the galaxy. While others demanded more extreme measures, the Zarian Prime delegate's scales had shifted to deep crimson, the color of his species' righteous anger. 800 years of deception, he declared, his voice carrying across the chamber. How many civilizations died while humans watched in silence? How many of our own worlds were consumed because of their cursed presence? Teek's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as it spoke for the hive worlds. Our collective consciousness recoils from the implications. Humanity has essentially been complicit in galactic genocide, yet they now ask us to trust them with our salvation. Dr. Blake rose from her seat, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether her species' desperate plan would receive the support it needed. "We do not ask for forgiveness," she said quietly. "Our ancestors made choices that have haunted us for centuries. But the final watch has discovered something the entities never expected us to learn." She activated a personal display that showed the results of centuries of research into dimensional mechanics and consciousness manipulation. The data revealed that humanity's connection to the extra-dimensional predators was more complex than a simple bargain. It was quantum mechanical in nature, tied to specific neural patterns that existed uniquely in human brain structure. The entities feed on consciousness, but they cannot directly interface with most forms of awareness, Dr. Blake explained. They require what we call resonance translators, minds that can bridge the gap between dimensions. Human neural patterns serve this function, but the connection works both ways. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. If humanity could manipulate their quantum consciousness connection, they might be able to turn their cursed awareness into a weapon against the very entities that had enslaved them. The plan requires every human in the galaxy to simultaneously enter a specific meditative state, Dr. Blake continued, combined with technology derived from the entities' own dimensional manipulation techniques. We can create a feedback loop that will slam shut the pathways between realities. Dr. Voss's gills fluttered with skeptical analysis. What are the risks of this attempt? And what happens to humanity if it succeeds? Dr. Blake's expression grew even more grave. Our scientists estimate that 30 to 40% of the human population will die instantly. Those whose consciousness has become too deeply intertwined with the extra-dimensional realm cannot survive the separation. The survivors will be forever changed, cut off from the mystical awareness that has defined our species' spiritual traditions for millennia. The Prism Collective's representative resonated with mathematical calculations. The probability of success approaches 67% based on available data. However, failure would likely result in the entities gaining unprecedented access to our dimensional framework, accelerating the galaxy's consumption. As debates raged across the chamber, long-range sensors detected new developments in the approaching anomaly. The darkness had begun spawning smaller manifestations, tentacles of void that reached ahead of the main mass to probe the galaxy's outer systems. Entire star clusters were aging millennia in seconds as reality itself began to unravel. The breaking point came when reports arrived from the Rim territories. The insectoid colonies of the hive worlds, known for their rigid logical thinking, had begun experiencing mass psychological breakdowns as their collective consciousness encountered emanations from the approaching entities. Entire hive minds were collapsing into madness as they glimpsed the true nature of the predators that hunted them. "We are running out of time," Kale announced as emergency klaxons began sounding throughout the station. "The entities are no longer waiting for their final approach. They are beginning the harvest early." The vote, when it came, surprised even Dr. Blake. The Threxian Empire, despite their delegates' earlier anger, committed their most powerful quantum computers to amplify the human neural network. The Prism Collective offered their mathematical expertise to optimize the feedback calculations. One by one, species that had every reason to hate humanity pledged their resources to the desperate gambit. "Perhaps this is justice," declared the Zarian delegate, his scales shifting to a complex pattern that indicated resigned determination. "If humanity must sacrifice itself to save the galaxy, then they will at least die with honor rather than complicity." But it was Teak who surprised everyone most. The insectoid researcher whose hive mind had recoiled in horror from humanity's revelations now spoke with the voice of billions of connected consciousnesses. "Our collective has deliberated across 17 different probability matrices. Despite the horror of humanity's past actions, we calculate that your species' plan offers the only statistically significant chance of survival. The hive worlds will provide full support." As the alliance took shape, Dr. Blake felt a mixture of hope and terror unlike anything she had experienced. Across the galaxy, human colonies were already beginning their preparations for the synchronized moment that would determine whether consciousness itself had a future in their reality. Ancient meditation techniques were being taught to populations that had never heard of the Final Watch, while technology that merged science with mysticism was deployed to amplify human awareness across impossible distances. The entities, sensing something was changing in the quantum structure of their hunting ground, accelerated their approach once more. The darkness now consumed multiple star systems each day, leaving behind voids in space-time that marked the death of everything that had once lived and thought and dreamed. With less than 3 months remaining before the final confrontation, the galaxy's surviving civilizations worked together in desperate unity. They knew that success would save billions of lives but cost humanity dearly, while failure would mean the end of consciousness throughout their reality. The ancient compact that had protected humans for centuries was about to be tested in the ultimate gamble against cosmic predators that had never known defeat. The moment arrived with the silence of space itself holding its breath. Across thousands of human worlds, from the bustling cities of Earth to the frontier mining colonies on the galaxy's edge, 12 billion human minds prepared to synchronize their consciousness in an act that would either save the galaxy or destroy it completely. Dr. Blake stood in the Luna facility's central chamber, surrounded by alien technology that hummed with barely contained energy. The quantum amplifiers provided by the Threxian Empire created geometric patterns of light that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. Around her, the Final Watch's most experienced practitioners prepared to guide humanity through its greatest sacrifice. The extradimensional entities had reached the galaxy's core systems, their presence manifesting as reality storms that aged entire planets in moments. Through the facility's monitors, Dr. Blake watched whole civilizations vanish as stars collapsed into dimensional voids that hurt to perceive. The darkness was no longer approaching, it was consuming everything in its path with a hunger that had grown across cosmic ages. "All human colonies report ready," announced the technician monitoring the galactic communication network. His voice carried the weight of knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether his species would survive the night. "Meditation states are synchronizing across 17 different time zones." Dr. Blake felt the first stirrings of the collective consciousness as human minds across the galaxy began to resonate with frequencies that touched the spaces between realities. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced during her years of training with the Final Watch. It felt like standing at the edge of an infinite abyss while something vast and alien stirred in the depths below. The entities, sensing the trap being prepared, unleashed their full fury against the galaxy's remaining defenses. Entire star systems aged millennia in seconds as impossible gravitational forces tore planets apart. Space itself began to unravel as the predators abandoned all pretense of subtlety in their feeding frenzy, but for the first time in their existence, the entities encountered resistance they could not simply consume. As human consciousness reached critical synchronization, the quantum amplifiers began channeling their collective awareness into frequencies that existed beyond normal spacetime. The feedback loop that had taken centuries to design finally activated, creating resonance patterns that turned humanity's cursed connection into a weapon. Dr. Blake felt her consciousness stretch across dimensions, as she served as the focal point for 12 billion human minds. Through the connection, she glimpsed the entities in their true form, vast intelligences that existed in the spaces between thoughts, feeding on the moment when consciousness realized its own mortality. They were older than galaxies, predators, that had consumed countless realities across infinite dimensions. The entities fought back with desperate fury, pouring their accumulated power into breaking the feedback loop before it could complete. Reality storms swept across human worlds as the predators tried to sever the connections that bound their prey. On Earth, gravitational anomalies caused tidal waves that reshaped continents. On Mars, the atmospheric processors failed as spacetime. Distortions twisted the laws of physics into impossible configurations, but humanity held firm. Even as their worlds burned around them, the human population maintained their meditative states with a determination that surprised their alien allies. In the depths of space, refugees huddled in damaged ships continued their mental disciplines, while their life support systems failed. On dying worlds, humans chose to complete the ritual rather than flee to safety. The breaking point came when Dr. Blake's consciousness finally reached the quantum threshold needed to reverse the dimensional pathways. Through her connection to every human mind in the galaxy, she felt the exact moment when the ancient compact snapped like an overstressed cable. The entities, caught between dimensions as the pathways collapsed, released psychic screams that shattered the barriers between realities. The cost was immediate and terrible. Across human space, nearly 30% of the population died instantly as their consciousness, too deeply connected to the extradimensional realm, could not survive the separation. Dr. Blake felt each death through the collective link, 12 billion individual lights being extinguished in a cascade of sacrifice that would haunt the survivors forever, but the gambit succeeded. The entities found themselves trapped in dimensional limbo, their connection to physical reality severed by the feedback loop they had never expected their prey to master. The spreading darkness stopped its advance, then began to recede as the cosmic wounds it had created slowly healed themselves. Dr. Blake collapsed as the collective consciousness finally dispersed. Her body aged decades by the ordeal of channeling forces that human physiology was never meant to contain. Around her, the alien technology powered down with harmonics that sounded like funeral dirges for the billions who had died to save their galaxy. In the aftermath, as emergency broadcasts confirmed the entity's retreat and the gradual stabilization of damaged spacetime, reports began flowing in from across human territory. The survivors were forever changed, cut off from the mystical awareness that had defined their species' spiritual traditions for millennia. They could no longer sense the dimensional currents that had once guided their mystics and shamans. The price of salvation had been the very connection that had made them valuable to their cosmic predators. The Galactic Council reconvened in solemn session to address the new reality. Dr. Blake, her hair now white from her ordeal, accepted appointment as the first director of dimensional security, tasked with monitoring the barriers between realities for signs of new threats. The position carried the weight of eternal vigilance, knowing that other entities might someday find ways to breach the protections humanity had died to create. Ambassador Kale, his reptilian features showing new respect for the species his people had once viewed with suspicion, addressed the council with words that would be remembered for generations. Humanity's survival was never due to superior technology or divine protection, he declared. It was due to their willingness to carry an impossible burden and ultimately sacrifice everything they held sacred to ensure that consciousness itself would continue to exist among the stars. The galaxy began to rebuild, but it was forever changed by the knowledge of what lurked in the spaces between realities. New technologies were developed to monitor dimensional stability, while ancient human meditation techniques were taught to other species as a form of early warning system against extradimensional threats. Dr. Blake stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt council station, watching ships from dozens of worlds working together to repair the damage caused by the entity's final assault. The humans among the crews moved with a subtle difference now, their spiritual awareness forever diminished by the sacrifice they had made. But they worked alongside their alien colleagues with a quiet dignity that spoke of burdens shared and prices willingly paid. The galaxy had learned the shocking truth about humanity's survival, but more importantly, it had learned the true measure of a species willing to damn itself to save others. In the end, humans had not outlasted every threat through strength or cunning, but through their capacity for sacrifice that went beyond mere survival to encompass something far more precious: the continuation of consciousness itself in a universe that had suddenly become a much lonelier place.